I opened my banking app at the airport, still in my coat, still dragging my carry-on behind me through the arrivals terminal at Pearson, and the number I saw made me stop walking entirely. Someone behind me bumped my shoulder and kept going. I stood there in the middle of the crowd and read the balance again. $42. My checking account, the one I had left with just over $11,000 before I flew to South Korea for my contract, had $42 in it. I thought it was a glitch. I thought maybe there was a display error, a bank system hiccup, something technical that would resolve itself by the time I got home. I took a breath, put my phone away, grabbed my bag, and kept walking toward the taxi stand. My sister had been looking after things while I was gone. She had my card details for emergencies only. There had to be an explanation. There was. I just wasn't ready for what it actually was. My name is Claire, and at the time this happened, I was 28 years old. I had been working as a hospital laboratory technologist in Toronto for 4 years before I got the offer. A 12-month research contract in Seoul with a biotech firm partnered with the university I had trained at. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't come twice. I said yes immediately. Before I left, I sat down with my sister and went through everything carefully. She was 34, 6 years older than me, married, living in Mississauga with her husband and their 2 kids. She seemed stable. She had always been the responsible one growing up, the one our parents trusted with decisions. I trusted her too. The arrangement was simple. I would transfer her $500 a month to cover any administrative costs, mail, the occasional in-person task at my bank branch if something needed signing, checking in on my storage unit. My condo was rented out to a property management company, so that was handled separately. I had a tenant paying $1,700 a month, and those payments were going directly into a separate savings account my sister couldn't access. Or so I thought. I had given her access to my main checking account because she needed to be able to pay the storage unit fees, which were billed monthly. I had not given her my savings account credentials. What I did not know, and would not find out until I landed back in Toronto 11 months later, was that my savings account and my checking account were linked for overdraft protection. And linked accounts, as it turns out, can be accessed in ways I never anticipated. The taxi ride home from the airport took 40 minutes. I messaged my sister from the back seat. "Just landed. Everything okay? My balance looks really weird." She replied in under a minute. "Oh yeah, there was some stuff that came up. I'll explain when I see you. Welcome home." I stared at the message. Some stuff. I had $11,000 in that account when I left. Now I had 42. I did the math in my head. That was not some stuff. That was $11,000 gone. When I got to my condo, my tenant had already vacated as planned, and the property management company had done a handover inspection. The unit was clean. I dropped my bags, sat on the floor because my couch wasn't there yet, still in storage, and called my sister. She let it ring 4 times before picking up. "Hey, so before you freak out, where is my money?" I said. "Claire, I can handle this, I just need a little time." "Where is my money?" There was a pause, and then she started talking, and what came out of her mouth was so far outside anything I had prepared myself for that I had to ask her to stop twice and start over. She and her husband had been having financial problems. He had been laid off from his job at a logistics company in February, 4 months after I had left for Seoul. They had burned through their savings by April. She had started using my checking account for groceries, utilities, small things at first. She had told herself she would pay it back before I returned. Then her husband found a business opportunity. A friend of his was starting a landscaping company and needed startup capital. They had decided to invest $15,000. $15,000 they didn't have. So she had transferred money from my savings account into my checking account, using the overdraft link she had discovered by accident, she said, and then moved it out into their joint account. Over 4 months, she had taken just under $11,000 from my savings. "We're going to pay you back," she said. "We just need time." I didn't say anything. I was looking at a bare wall in my empty condo, holding a phone that suddenly felt very heavy. "Claire, say something." "I have to go," I said. I hung up. I called my bank first thing the next morning. I explained the situation and asked what my options were. The woman I spoke with was patient and thorough. She confirmed the transfers, walked me through the transaction history, and flagged that the linked account access had been used in a way that was outside what I had intended when I set it up. She told me that because my sister had login credentials I had shared with her voluntarily, even though only for the checking account, it complicated things. She recommended I come in to speak with a financial crimes specialist. I booked the appointment for 2 days later. In those 2 days, I did not contact my sister. I did not contact my brother-in-law. I sat with what I knew, made notes, pulled every piece of documentation I could access through my online banking portal, and started building a picture of exactly what had happened and when. I had worked in a laboratory for 4 years. Precise documentation, careful sequencing, nothing assumed. You work with what the data shows you, not with what you want it to show. What the data showed me was a pattern. Transfers every 10 to 14 days, always just under a threshold that would have triggered an automatic fraud flag. Whoever had been doing this knew enough to stay under the radar. That was not accidental. That was deliberate. When I met with the specialist at the bank, I brought printed records with the transactions highlighted and dated. She looked at what I had and said quietly, "You've done a lot of the work already." "I work in a lab," I said. "Evidence is evidence." My parents called me that same evening. My sister had gotten to them first. My mother's opening line was, "You need to understand what they've been going through." I sat down. I had been expecting this call. "Mom," I said. She took $11,000 out of my savings account without my permission. She had access to my checking, not my savings. She transferred money between accounts using a link that was set up for overdraft emergencies. That is not what it was used for. She was going to pay you back. With what? They put the money into a landscaping startup. That money is gone. My mother got quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, when you went to Korea, you left her with a lot of responsibility. She was doing you a favor." I want to be clear about what I felt in that moment. It was not anger exactly. It was something colder than anger. It was the specific feeling of watching something you had always believed, that your family meant safety, quietly dissolve in front of you. "She was doing me a favor," I repeated. "Yes." And things got hard for her. You could be a little more understanding. "I'm going to be speaking with the bank's financial crimes division," I said. "And I'm going to speak with a lawyer. I just wanted you to know that before anything moves forward." She tried to say something else. I said goodnight and ended the call. My brother-in-law called me the next morning. He was calmer than I expected, almost rehearsed. He told me that he understood I was upset, that he and my sister had made a mistake, that they had every intention of repaying me, and that he wanted to propose a repayment plan before I escalated things unnecessarily. "What kind of plan?" I asked. He said they could manage $300 a month. $300 a month. At that rate, I would be repaid in roughly 3 years, without interest, without acknowledgement of what had actually happened. "I'll take that under consideration," I said. What I was actually doing was recording the conversation. In Ontario, you can legally record a phone call you are a party to without notifying the other person. I didn't know if I would need it. I recorded it anyway. The lawyer I met with specialized in civil litigation and had dealt with family financial disputes before. She listened to the full story, reviewed the bank documents I had brought, and listened to the recording of my brother-in-law's call. She told me that what my sister had done, accessing a savings account through an overdraft link for purposes clearly outside the authorized scope, constituted civil fraud. Whether it rose to criminal liability would depend on the investigation, but civilly, I had strong grounds to sue for recovery of the funds plus damages. She also told me something that I think about often. Repayment offers made after discovery are not the same as consent given before the fact. The fact that she planned to pay you back does not change what happened. I asked about criminal charges. She said that was my decision to make, and that I should make it carefully, because once that process began, it would affect my sister's family, including her children. I went home and sat with that for a long time. My sister called me 3 days after my lawyer meeting, not to apologize, to ask me to think about her kids. They didn't do anything wrong, she said. I know, I said. Neither did I. Claire, if you press criminal charges, Gordon could lose everything. We could lose the house. I noticed she said Gordon, her husband. Not, we made a mistake. Not, I'm so sorry for what I did to you. Just, Gordon could lose everything. Where is the money now? I asked. It went into the business. The business hasn't turned a profit yet. Is there anything left? She was quiet for a moment. About 2,000, maybe a little more. I need that returned to my account this week, I said. Whatever is left. And I need a full written accounting of where every dollar went. And then you won't press charges? I didn't say that. She started crying. I had grown up with that sound. I knew every frequency of my sister's tears. The ones that were real and the ones that were a tool. This call, the tears had started too quickly and at exactly the right moment. I said I had to go and hung up. A week later, I got a notification that $2,340 had been transferred into my account. There was no note, no message. Just the money appearing, like she was paying a bill. I documented it and sent a copy to my lawyer. My lawyer had by then filed a formal demand letter, which was the first step before civil proceedings. My sister and her husband had 14 days to respond with a concrete repayment proposal, documentation of the business expenditure, and a signed acknowledgement of liability. They responded on day 13. The proposal was $500 a month, better than what Gordon had offered on the phone, but still a 30-month repayment, with no interest and no acknowledgement that what had been done was wrong. Just a line at the bottom that said they regretted any misunderstanding. My lawyer described it as insulting. I described it as exactly what I had expected. We went forward with civil proceedings. I will not pretend it was simple. It took 8 months. There were hearings and delays, and one very uncomfortable afternoon in a mediator's office in downtown Toronto, where my sister sat across from me and did not make eye contact for 2 hours while her lawyer tried to renegotiate terms in real time. What came out during discovery was worse than I had known. The money had not gone entirely into the landscaping business. Records showed that approximately $4,000 had been spent on a trip to Mexico, Cancun, in March, 3 months after Gordon had supposedly been laid off. 2 months after they had started taking money from my account, my sister and her husband had taken a vacation. I remember looking at the documentation for that, the credit card records, the flight receipts, and feeling something click into place. The careful transaction amounts, the pattern. This was not a family in crisis making desperate decisions. This was a family that had decided my absence was an opportunity. The mediator, a quiet woman with silver hair and reading glasses, looked at those records and said nothing for a moment. Then she looked at my sister and said, "I'd encourage your client to reconsider her position." They settled 2 weeks later. Full repayment, $9,000 net after the $2,300 they had already returned, plus $3,000 in damages and legal costs, paid within 90 days. My sister was also required to sign a formal acknowledgement of unauthorized account access. My lawyer said it would not function as a criminal admission, but that it created a documented record that could be referenced if anything like this ever happened again. My parents did not speak to me for 4 months after the settlement. When my mother finally called, she did not apologize for what she had said during that first conversation. She said she hoped we could move forward. I said I hoped so too. And I meant it, in the specific way that means I have accepted that the version of my family I had before I left for Seoul no longer exists. And I have made my peace with that. My sister and I have not spoken since the settlement was signed. I don't know if we will. I think about her kids sometimes. I hope they're okay. But hope is not the same as trust. And I've learned to be careful about confusing the two. What I want to say to anyone watching this who has been in something like this, not necessarily the same situation, but the same feeling. The specific vertigo of realizing someone you loved had been calculating how much they could take from you while your back was turned, is this. Document everything. Save everything. Your memory is not enough, and your feelings are not enough, and she was going to pay me back is not a legal defense. The bank specialist told me something I've thought about 100 times since. She said, the people who take advantage of family members often count on the family not wanting to make it official. The moment you start treating it like the financial crime it actually is, not a family argument, not a misunderstanding, not something to handle privately over tea, things change. I went to Korea to build something. I worked 12-hour days in a lab in a city where I didn't speak the language fluently yet, eating convenience store kimbap for lunch because I was saving every dollar I could. I came home to $42 and a sister who thought a vacation in Cancun was a reasonable use of my savings. I got my money back. I got my footing back. I got my apartment put back together. Furniture moved in from storage, my routines rebuilt, my life recognizable again. Some things I did not get back. That's the part they never really tell you. That even when you win, the ledger doesn't fully balance. There's a line on it that will always show what it cost you to find out who someone really was. But I know now, and I will never not know again. I think about the $42 a lot, not with bitterness anymore, more like the way you remember the exact moment you realized something you believed wasn't true. Standing in the arrivals terminal at Pearson, coat still on, bag still in my hand, staring at a number on my phone that didn't make sense. That was the moment everything split into before and after. What happened to me wasn't random. My sister didn't stumble into taking $11,000 by accident. She made a choice, then another, then another. Then one, slightly more deliberate than the last. Each one timed carefully enough to stay under the bank's fraud threshold. That kind of thing doesn't happen without knowing, on some level, that what you're doing is wrong. And I think the part that took me the longest to sit with wasn't the money. It was understanding that she had looked at the trust I had placed in her and decided it was something she could use. That's a particular kind of wrong that doesn't have a polite word for it. What helped me? What actually got me through the 8 months of civil proceedings, the mediator's office, my mother's silence, was refusing to treat it like anything other than what it was, a financial crime committed by someone I loved. The moment I stopped trying to find the version of the story where it was a misunderstanding, where she had just panicked and made a terrible mistake with genuinely good intentions, I was able to think clearly. And thinking clearly was the only thing that got my money back. I was 28 years old. I had spent a year in Seoul eating convenience store lunches and logging 12-hour days in a lab because I was trying to build something. The discipline that took. The daily decision to show up and do the work even when I was homesick and exhausted and unsure. That same discipline is what I brought into that bank meeting with my printed transaction records. It's what I brought into my lawyer's office. It's what got me to the settlement table with documentation that couldn't be argued with. You don't get to control what other people do. My sister made her choices. Gordon made his. My mother chose to defend them. I couldn't undo any of that. What I could do was be precise, be patient, and refuse to let the discomfort of pursuing legal action against family talk me out of something that was simply right. There's a version of this story where I accept the $300 a month repayment plan, where I swallow the humiliation to keep the peace, where I tell myself that family is more important than $11,000. I understand why people make that choice. I don't think it's weak, but it wasn't the right choice for me, and I think I knew that the moment my brother-in-law used the word unnecessarily, as in, don't escalate things unnecessarily, as if accountability was the problem. The ledger balanced, mostly. The money came back. What I carry now is something cleaner than what I had before. Not innocence, but clarity. I know what I'm willing to do to protect what I've built. I know what documentation looks like. I know that being someone's sister does not make you responsible for absorbing the consequences of their choices. I went to Korea to become someone who could handle her own life. Turns out, I came home and had to prove it.